All right, we're diving into some pretty deep stuff today. Our listener sent us Gems of Divine Mysteries.
Oh, that's a fascinating one.
It's an epistle, right?
Yeah, written by Baha'u'lláh.
The founder of the Baha'i faith.
That's right.
Now we're looking at an English translation, of course.
Of course, the original was in Arabic.
And what makes this even more interesting is that it was actually written in response to a specific question.
Yeah, a seeker, Seed Yusufi Sidihi, Fahani, had a question about the Bab.
Okay, and for our listeners who might not be familiar, the Bab is a central figure in the Baha'i faith, right?
Exactly. He's considered a prophet, a forerunner to Baha'u'lláh.
So this question was about how the Bab connects to this concept of transformation.
Yeah, that's the big idea, the return of the promised one, but in a new human form.
Okay, so we're dealing with some pretty heavy spiritual concepts here. And from what I'm gathering, this epistle goes way beyond just answering that one question.
It definitely does. Gems of Divine Mysteries tackles some really big questions about why people reject prophets throughout history.
Which is a question that resonates across so many different faiths and traditions.
Exactly. And it delves into how we can get tripped up by taking Scripture too literally.
So missing the deeper symbolic meaning.
Yeah. And how that can cause us to miss the signs pointing towards new manifestations of God.
Okay, I'm hooked already. Can you give me an example of where this symbolic language pops up in the text?
Well, Baha'u'lláh actually uses examples from the Bible
Okay,
of
interesting.
describing a new manifestation as having eyes like a flame of fire.
Whoa, that's a powerful image. But I mean, we shouldn't be looking for someone with literal flames shooting out of their eyes, right?
Right. It's not about the physical. It's about what those flaming eyes represent.
So what's the deeper meaning?
Think of it as this intense spiritual insight, like the ability to see through everything, to cut through all pretense and reveal the truth.
So kind of like an X-ray vision for the soul? Okay, that makes a lot more sense. So it's about understanding the deeper spiritual meaning, not getting stuck on the literal interpretation?
Absolutely. And this is where things get really interesting when we talk about signs and symbols.
Okay, tell me more about that.
Well, Baha'u'llah's argument is that these signs often have those deeper spiritual meanings.
Which might explain why people have missed recognizing prophets in the past.
That's a big part of it. They're looking for purely physical signs and events, not the spiritual ones.
It's like we're so used to thinking in concrete terms that we miss the subtle cues right in front of us.
And that leads us to a central theme in Gems of Divine Mysteries, the idea of the continuity of revelation.
Okay, unpack that for me.
Baha'u'lláh is saying that divine revelation isn't just a one-time thing.
It's not like a single event that happened way back when.
Exactly. It's an ongoing process throughout history. New manifestations come, and each one builds on the ones who came before.
Like building blocks.
Yeah, or think of it like a symphony. Each movement adds to the themes that were introduced earlier. It just becomes richer and more complex.
So is this idea of transformation that we talked about earlier, the promised one returning in a new form, is that part of this continuous revelation?
Absolutely. Each manifestation comes at a specific time, tailored for what humanity needs at that moment.
Okay, I have to admit, this is where it gets really interesting for me. Those 7 spiritual cities. The text mentions names like the city of absolute nothingness.
And the city that have no name or description.
I mean, come on, how can you not be intrigued by that?
Right.
It's like a spiritual adventure. So let's take a tour through these mystical cities, shall we?
Let's do it. Each city symbolizes a stage in the spiritual journey. Think of it like levels in a video game.
Okay, I like that analogy.
You have to master one level before moving on to the next.
So where do we start?
The first one is the Garden of Search.
That's like character creation, right? The beginning of the quest.
Exactly. This is where the seeker starts their journey, leaving behind worldly concerns and focusing on searching for God.
Okay, so picture someone finally putting down their phone, looking up at the stars, and feeling a sense of awe.
Right, that yearning for something bigger than themselves, that's the energy here.
I love that initial spark of seeking. What's next?
Next comes the City of Love and Rapture.
Oh, that sounds intense.
It is. This is where the seeker's love for God just intensifies. It's like being overwhelmed by it.
Like a spiritual tsunami of love.
Exactly.
Okay, what about the third city?
The City of Divine Unity.
So after searching and intense love, what happens here?
This is where the seeker has that aha moment of realizing that everything is connected.
We're all part of the same whole?
And the oneness of God, it's like finally understanding we're all just drops in the same ocean.
Wow, that's powerful. So we've got searching, passionate love, and then this realization of unity. Where do we go from there?
Get ready for the Garden of Wonderment.
Okay, the name alone sounds amazing.
This is where the seeker is just blown away by the wonder of creation.
It's that childlike feeling of looking up at the clouds and seeing all sorts of shapes.
That pure sense of wonder and amazement.
I don't understand any of this, but it's incredible.
Okay, on to city number 5. What's next on this spiritual odyssey?
Now we enter the city of absolute nothingness.
Okay, now we're getting into the really mysterious stuff.
I know, right?
What does that even mean? Absolute nothingness.
It sounds a bit intimidating, but think of it this way. It's not about the absence of everything, it's about the absence of ego.
Okay, so not literal nothingness.
Right, it's about quieting that voice in our heads that's constantly telling us who we are and what we need.
So letting go of that sense of a separate self.
Exactly, it's the ultimate surrender.
Okay, I'm starting to get it. We're on the home stretch now. 2 cities left. What's city number 6?
The city of immortality.
Oh, wow. That sounds profound.
It is. Here, the seeker experiences true spiritual life, a state of being that transcends death. So it's not about living forever in our physical bodies.
Not in the way we typically think of it. It's about realizing the eternal nature of the soul.
It's that spark within us that lives on.
Exactly. And get this, Bahá'u'lláh says, in this city, everything endures, it never fades. The sun never sets, the moon never wanes. It's this realm of pure, timeless existence.
Wow. Okay, last but not least, we have the city that hath no name or description.
The ultimate mystery.
This one sounds like it's beyond words.
It is. Bahá'u'lláh doesn't give us much to work with here, just that it's beyond human comprehension.
So we can't even try to define it.
He even says that he can't describe it fully, that its mysteries are known only to God.
So it's like the ultimate spiritual reality.
You got it. Think of it as the grand finale of that spiritual symphony.
The culmination of the seeker's journey.
A realm of pure divine presence.
This whole concept of the 7 cities is mind-blowing. It really paints a vivid picture of the spiritual path, with all its challenges and triumphs.
It does.
But it makes me wonder, how does all of this connect to our everyday lives? What does it mean for us here and now?
That's a great question, and I think it's one Bahá'u'lláh wants us to really wrestle with.
It's not just an intellectual exercise.
Exactly. It's about applying these concepts to our own lives and using them to guide our spiritual growth.
Like a roadmap, not just a travel brochure.
That's a perfect way to put it. And one of the key things Bahá'u'lláh highlights is understanding the spiritual meaning behind life, death, and resurrection.
So he's not just talking about literal physical death.
Well, he is, but he's also pointing to a deeper spiritual dimension to these concepts.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Tell me more.
He says true life is about recognizing God's presence within us, and that death is actually about being spiritually unaware, disconnected from that divine spark.
So like being physically alive but spiritually dead?
A walking zombie without a soul.
Okay, that's a powerful image. And then resurrection in this context would be?
It's about spiritual awakening. That moment when we recognize God's presence and become truly alive in a spiritual sense.
Like waking up from a dream and finally seeing the world clearly. This whole reframing of life, death, and resurrection is really something. It takes those concepts out of the purely physical realm and places them in the context of this spiritual journey.
Exactly.
It makes you think, what am I truly seeking? And speaking of seeking, Baha'u'lláh also stresses the importance of humility on this journey. Why is pride so dangerous on this path?
Well, imagine pride is like wearing a blindfold. It can make us think we've arrived spiritually when actually we're all still learning and growing.
So you might miss out on opportunities for growth if you think you've already reached the peak.
Exactly. Humility, on the other hand, keeps us open to new insights.
It's like that saying, the more you know, the more you realize you don't know.
Exactly. And it allows us to recognize our own limitations and be open to receiving guidance.
It keeps us from getting stuck in our own little bubbles. Now, this is making me think about that initial question from Sayyid Yusufi Sidi Farhani, the one about the transformation of the Mahdi into the Bab. How does that fit into all of this?
It's a perfect example of this principle in action.
Okay, explain that to me.
Baha'u'lláh is saying it's not about a literal physical transformation, but about the continuation of revelation.
So the Bab is fulfilling the expectations of the Mahdi, but in a new and unexpected way.
Precisely.
So the concept is evolving, but the core purpose, that divine guidance, is still there.
Exactly.
Okay, that makes sense. Now, there's one more thing I've been wondering about. The text mentions the city of Jabulka, where the hidden imam is said to reside. Is that an actual place?
Well, Baha'u'lláh clarifies that. It's not a physical location.
Ah, it's symbolic.
Yes, it represents the divine realm.
So when traditions talk about the hidden imam appearing from Jabal-Ka, it's not a literal journey.
Exactly. It's about a new manifestation emerging from that divine realm, bringing a new revelation.
Okay, that's fascinating. So it's like Baha'u'lláh is deconstructing these traditional beliefs and showing us a deeper, more symbolic understanding.
You got it.
And this reminds me of something we talked about earlier, the danger of taking scripture too literally.
Absolutely. Baha'u'lláh warns against taking every word at face value, especially when describing spiritual realities.
Because language is limited when it comes to talking about the divine, right?
Exactly. Remember that example about the manifestation having eyes like a flame of fire?
Yeah.
That's why we need to look beyond the literal.
Otherwise, we miss the whole point.
Right. We need to search for the deeper symbolic meaning, the message behind the words.
Which requires careful study and reflection.
That's key. Approaching scripture with an open mind, trying to understand the message rather than getting caught up in literal interpretations.
Because if we're too focused on the letter of the law, we might miss the spirit entirely. Now, this makes me think about how people have reacted to prophets throughout history. Often, they're rejected, ridiculed, even persecuted. Why do you think that is?
Baha'u'lláh offers some insights into that in Gems of Divine Mysteries.
Okay, what does he say?
He says one reason is that people become attached to their own interpretations.
Attached to how they've always understood things.
Right, to their own interpretations of Scripture and their religious traditions.
So when a new manifestation comes along, challenging those interpretations.
It creates resistance, even hostility.
Because it forces people to reconsider what they believe.
Exactly. And that can be really uncomfortable.
It's like stepping outside your comfort zone and questioning everything you thought you knew. And it's not just about intellectual understanding, right?
You're right. Baha'u'lláh also emphasizes spiritual perception.
That inner knowing that comes from connecting with God's presence.
That's it.
Because if we're only relying on our intellect, we might miss that deeper reality. This brings me to another point that Baha'u'lláh brings up in the epistle. He talks about how God uses certain words and phrases to actually test people's faith.
Ah, yes.
What do you think he means by that?
Well, he's saying that God doesn't always make things easy for us. It's like he wants us to think critically, to really dig into the meaning.
So it's like a spiritual obstacle course designed to strengthen our faith.
In a way, yes. And he even gives a specific example from the Quran.
Oh, which one?
The verse that says, "Do men think when they say, 'We believe,' they shall be let alone and not be put to proof?"
So it's not enough to just say, we believe. Our faith has to be tested.
We have to demonstrate it through action, through our willingness to be challenged.
That makes a lot of sense. And it all ties into this theme of transformation, doesn't it?
Definitely.
Not just the transformation of the promised one, but our own transformation through spiritual growth.
Absolutely. It's about continually striving to refine our understanding, to go deeper in our connection with God, to become more aware.
The lifelong journey.
It is, and one that requires effort, reflection, and a willingness to be transformed.
So I guess the big question is, what does all of this mean for us? Why should we care about these concepts? Why should we care about transformation, the continuity of revelation, these spiritual journeys outlined in Gems of Divine Mysteries?
Because it provides a framework for understanding our own spiritual path.
A way to make sense of it all.
It shows us that spiritual growth is an ongoing process.
There are stages, like those cities we talked about.
And milestones along the way. It also highlights how important it is to recognize and embrace the guidance that comes from God's manifestations.
So it's not just about learning these concepts in a detached way, it's about applying them to our lives.
Exactly. It's a guide for our own spiritual growth.
Wow, this is all so much to think about.
It is, but it's worth reflecting on, especially if you're interested in deepening your understanding of your own spiritual path.
You know, one thing that really stands out to me is how Baha'u'lláh connects these spiritual concepts to the idea of detachment.
That's an important one.
He says to really embark on this journey, we have to detach, not just from material possessions, but also from those limiting beliefs and preconceived notions we hold on to.
It's like we have to clear away all the clutter, both internal and external, so we can really focus on what matters, our connection with the divine.
So it's about creating that space within ourselves.
Exactly.
And once we've created that space, then we can enter that city of love and rapture where our love for God intensifies. Baha'u'llah's description of this stage is so vivid.
It's powerful.
It's like you can almost feel the seeker's longing.
A complete surrender to that love, where they're totally consumed by the desire for union with the divine.
And Baha'u'lláh writes that in this state, the seeker discerneth not his left from his right, nor doth he distinguish land from sea or desert from mountain.
Wow.
It's like all earthly distinctions fade away in the face of this overwhelming love.
It's all-encompassing.
I'm curious, are there practical things we can do to cultivate this kind of love in our own lives?
Baha'u'lláh encourages practices like prayer, meditation, and studying sacred scriptures.
Things that help us connect.
Exactly. These practices can help nurture our love for God.
So it's about taking action, actively engaging in those spiritual practices. And maybe once we've cultivated that deep love, we can start to experience that unity described in the city of divine unity.
It's a beautiful concept.
I love that idea of seeing all differences return to a single word and all illusions culminate in a single point.
It's about recognizing the underlying oneness beneath the surface diversity.
It's like that saying, we are all drops in the same ocean.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And to illustrate that point, Baha'u'lláh actually quotes a saying, knowledge is one point, which the foolish have multiplied.
So true knowledge is about seeing the connections, not getting lost in the details.
You got it.
Okay, so we've explored the Garden of Search, the City of Love and Rapture, and the City of Divine Unity.
The first three cities.
And it seems like they're focused on detachment, love, and unity.
That's a good way to summarize it.
What about the next stage, the Garden of Wonderment? What happens there?
This is where things shift a bit.
How so?
This stage is all about awe and wonder. The seeker is struck by the sheer magnificence of creation.
It's like rediscovering that childlike sense of wonder that we often lose as we grow up.
Exactly. It's a reminder that even the most knowledgeable among us can't fully grasp the vastness and complexity of what God has created.
There's always more to learn, more to discover.
Exactly. And to emphasize this, Baha'u'lláh uses some beautiful imagery.
Oh, like what?
He says, the bird that taketh flight in the atmosphere of the realm on high will never be able to soar unto the heaven of transcendent holiness, nor taste of the fruits which God hath brought forth therein, nor quaff from the streams which he hath caused to flow in its midst.
Wow, that's beautiful and powerful.
It acknowledges the limits of our perception, our inability to truly comprehend the divine.
It's humbling.
It is, but it also keeps us open to wonder, to the possibility of always discovering something new.
Because we can never know it all. This stage seems to require a lot of humility, a willingness to admit we don't have all the answers.
You're absolutely right, and that humility is so important for continuing to grow spiritually.
It allows us to keep learning and growing.
Exactly. To be open to the possibility that our understanding of God and his creation is always evolving.
Because we're not static beings. We're constantly changing, growing, evolving.
And that evolution, that ongoing transformation, is what this journey is all about.
Okay, I want to circle back to something you mentioned earlier about the dangers of pride and vainglory.
Okay.
Why is it so crucial to be aware of those qualities, especially when we're making progress on our spiritual path?
Because pride and vainglory can give us this false sense of spiritual arrival.
Like we've made it and we're better than others.
Exactly, and it
Sure.
can make us resistant to learning and change.
So we need to be careful not to let our egos inflate.
Right, maintaining humility, recognizing that we're all still on this journey, there's always more to learn.
And that brings up another point Baha'u'lláh makes, that true spiritual attainment isn't about reaching some external goal. It's about the transformation that happens inside us.
He's talking about inner transformation, not external rewards.
Can you say more about that?
He says that even if we were to reach the ultimate goal, to find God, we'd only be at that abode which have been raised up within our own hearts.
So the real journey is inwards.
And he goes on to say that no matter how hard we strive, we can never truly reach God's essence because he's in a realm beyond our comprehension.
So the destination is also within. This makes me think about that city of absolute nothingness, the fifth city. It seems like that stage is all about letting go of the ego, that sense of a separate self, and surrendering to the divine.
You're right on the mark. It's about recognizing that our individual identity is ultimately an illusion.
It's about realizing our true reality is found in our connection with God.
Exactly.
And Baha'u'lláh uses such strong imagery to describe it, saying that the seeker forgetteth his soul, spirit, body, and very being.
And immerseth himself in the sea of nothingness.
A complete dissolution of the self.
Powerful, isn't it?
It sounds both terrifying and liberating at the same time.
Because it involves letting go of everything we think we are.
And yet it's also a stage of profound spiritual realization, isn't it?
It is. It's that point where the seeker experiences true unity with God.
A state of being beyond limitations.
It's like the ultimate goal of the spiritual journey.
But we have to remember, it's not the end.
Right, there are still 2 more cities to explore.
The city of immortality and the city that hath no name or description.
Exactly. The journey continues, and with each stage, the seeker gains a deeper connection with God.
This is a lot to absorb. But before we move on, I want to dig a little deeper into that city of absolute nothingness. I'm still trying to wrap my head around what it actually means to experience nothingness.
It's not about things ceasing to exist.
What is it about, then?
It's about the absence of the ego, that limited sense of self that separates us from God.
So letting go of that illusion of separation.
Exactly. And that can be really tough because it means facing and releasing all those beliefs and attachments that make up our sense of self.
Stripping away the layers to experience our true nature, which is divine.
Precisely. It's in this nothingness that we can fully experience God's presence.
Because there's nothing blocking it anymore.
Baha'u'lláh puts it beautifully, saying that in this state, the effulgent glories of the beloved are revealed to the sincere lover, and the resplendent lights of the friend are cast upon the severed heart that is devoted to him.
Wow. Like finally seeing clearly.
Without all the distortions of the ego.
What's it like for the seeker in that state? What do they feel?
It's hard to say.
Yeah.
Baha'u'lláh doesn't go into detail about the subjective experience, but he does say that they will find no trace of his own self or of any other soul.
It sounds like a complete merging where all sense of individuality disappears.
A merging with the divine.
It sounds both terrifying and exhilarating.
It's an experience that goes beyond our usual ways of thinking and feeling.
And it takes a lot of trust, a willingness to completely surrender to the unknown.
You're right. It's a leap of faith, letting go of everything familiar.
And yet it's also a leap towards something much greater.
Something more fulfilling than we can imagine.
That's the paradox of the spiritual path, isn't it? Letting go to embrace something bigger.
It is. It's a constant process of letting go and embracing the unknown, surrendering to something greater than ourselves.
And through that surrender, we find our true selves.
And experience that boundless love and grace of the divine.
Okay, so we've explored the depths of this city of absolute nothingness. Where do we go from here?
From this incredible state, the seeker ascends to the city of immortality.
And what awaits them there?
Immortality, as you might have guessed. But it's not just about physical immortality.
Okay, so it's more than just living forever in our physical bodies.
Exactly. It's about experiencing a state of being that transcends the limitations of time and space.
It's about realizing that our souls are eternal.
Precisely. And Baha'u'lláh describes this city as a place where all that existeth shall indeed endure and will never perish.
It's a realm of permanence.
Where the sun never sets, the moon never wanes.
It sounds like a place of pure bliss and perfection.
It is. And he emphasizes that this state of immortality is not something we attain after we die. It's something we can experience right here, right now.
So it's about accessing that spiritual awareness that allows us to go beyond the limitations of our physical existence.
Exactly. And in this state, the seeker finds true freedom and liberation.
Because they're not bound by the fears and anxieties of the material world anymore.
They've realized their true nature, and they're free to live in accordance with their divine purpose.
This makes me think about that concept of dying to self that we talked about earlier. It seems like experiencing immortality requires us to fully let go of our ego.
To completely surrender who we think we are.
Because our individual identity is an illusion. Our true reality is found in our connection with God. And it's through that realization, that surrender, that we access this immortality that Baha'u'lláh is talking about.
Exactly.
Okay, we've been through the depths of the city of absolute nothingness. We've glimpsed the heights of the city of immortality. That's quite a spiritual journey.
It is.
But there's still one city left, the city that hath no name or description. This one feels especially mysterious.
It really is. Baha'u'lláh doesn't give us much to go on with this final city.
Just that it's beyond what we can understand.
He says even he can't describe it fully.
Like its mysteries are known only to God.
And his manifestations.
So it's like the ultimate spiritual reality.
A realm of pure divine presence that transcends everything we know.
So we can't even categorize or name it.
It's a reminder that no matter how much we learn, how far we go on this path, There will always be things that remain a mystery.
The divine is ultimately beyond what we can grasp.
Exactly.
So we can only approach this city with a sense of wonder, recognizing our limitations.
And trust that the journey, the process of seeking and growing, that's what brings us closer to God.
It's about the change that happens within us.
As we strive to know and love the divine.
This is giving me so much to think about.
It's a lot to process, for sure.
But before we get too carried away, I think it's important to remember what this means for us practically.
Yeah, how do we apply this to our lives?
How do we take these profound ideas and make them relevant to our everyday experiences?
One way is to focus on those qualities that Baha'u'lláh keeps coming back to. Humility, detachment, love, trustworthiness.
The foundation of spiritual character.
Exactly. And if we try to embody those qualities in everything we do, we'll start to change ourselves.
And hopefully, we can contribute to creating a better world.
A world that's more just and loving.
So it's not just about our personal growth, it's about making a difference in the world around us.
Precisely.
That's a really powerful idea. It reminds me of how much impact even small acts of kindness and compassion can have.
Every little act matters.
Every act of love, every gesture of generosity, any effort to promote justice and unity, all of it contributes to a better world.
It all adds up. It's like that saying, be the change you wish to see.
And by living by those spiritual principles in Gems of Divine Mysteries, we can be part of that change.
Working together to build a world that reflects the love and unity of God. It's true. It takes work.
The spiritual path isn't always easy, is it?
It's not a walk in the park.
There are definitely going to be times when we struggle, times when we doubt.
Yeah, times when we feel like we've lost our way.
It's like anything worthwhile in life, though. It takes effort and perseverance to really make progress.
That's a good way to put it. It's a process of continual striving.
But the important thing is to never give up, right?
Keep going.
To keep searching, to keep growing.
And to remember that we don't have to do it alone.
Oh, that's so important. We have a community. We have the guidance of the prophets.
And the support of our spiritual community, that's huge. And of course, the love of the divine to sustain us.
It's like having this incredible support system, the safety net to catch us when we fall. And because we all make mistakes, we all stumble, it's good to know that God's mercy is always there.
Always there to pick us up and guide us back.
It's like a reassuring presence, knowing that no matter what happens, we're loved.
That unconditional love. Now, thinking about all this, it brings me back to that initial question from Sayyid Yusufi Siddiqui Fahani.
The question about why people reject the prophets.
Yeah.
And after exploring all these concepts from Gems of Divine Mysteries, I think I have a better grasp of why it happens.
I think so too. We've seen how people can become so attached to their own understanding, their own interpretations.
They get stuck in their ways.
And that can lead to resistance when the new manifestation comes along and challenges those beliefs.
It shakes things up. And then there's that spiritual blindness we talked about.
Where people can't see the truth even when it's staring them in the face.
It's almost like they're looking but not seeing. And of course, there's pride.
Pride is a big one. That ego can blind us to our own flaws. And it can make us resistant to learning and growing.
So it's a multifaceted issue, really.
It is, but I think Baha'u'lláh gives us a way to overcome these obstacles.
A way to see clearly and recognize truth.
He shows us a path.
What is that path? How do we find it?
It's the path of humility.
Humility, okay.
Of detachment and love. It's about releasing those preconceived notions.
And opening ourselves to the divine.
Letting go and embracing that transformative power of God's revelation.
It's about really wanting to know and love God.
That's the key, that sincere desire.
And this message is so powerful, it makes me want to shout it from the rooftops.
I know what you mean. It's something to share.
It feels crucial to share these teachings with others.
Absolutely. The more we spread these spiritual insights, the more we contribute to humanity's awakening.
And it opens the door for others to experience that transformation, that divine love.
Exactly. Okay, I think we've covered a lot today. But before we wrap up, there's one passage from Gems of Divine Mysteries that I want to touch on.
Which one is that?
The part where Baha'u'lláh describes what true believers should be like. It's a beautiful depiction of spiritual character.
Oh, yeah, I remember that part. It's where he says the signs of humility should be evident on their faces.
And that the light of sanctity should radiate from their countenances. that they should walk on this earth as if they're in God's presence,
That they should be recognizable by their actions.
set apart from everyone else by their deeds.
It's a high standard, but so inspiring.
It is. It reminds us that true faith isn't just about saying you believe,
It's about embodying it.
living in a way that reflects that belief.
Letting our actions speak louder than our words. It makes me think about all the problems we face in the world today.
There are a lot.
Conflicts, injustices, the environmental crisis. It feels like we need more people who embody those qualities.
People who are dedicated to serving God and humanity.
Putting those principles into action.
I agree. The world needs spiritual transformation, and each of us has a part to play.
By striving to embody those qualities of humility, detachment, love, and trustworthiness.
And by working towards a more just and peaceful world.
A world that reflects the unity and harmony of the divine. That's the vision, isn't it?
It is, and it gives me hope. Because even when things seem dark, there's always that potential for light and transformation.
It's a reminder that it's possible.
Absolutely. That potential is within each of us.
Wow, that was intense. We covered so much ground today.
We did.
What about you? What really struck you about those 7 cities?
It's fascinating how each city isn't just a stage in that spiritual journey, but also a different way to experience reality.
Right, like the city of love and rapture is about being totally swept up in that love for God.
And then the city of divine unity, it shifts to perceiving that interconnectedness of everything.
It's like each city gives us a different perspective, a different way of looking at the world. I'm really drawn to that city of absolute nothingness, that idea of letting go of the ego completely.
It's a powerful concept.
To just surrender to the divine.
It takes a lot of trust to embrace the unknown.
But the potential rewards are huge.
They are. Speaking of rewards, the city of immortality. That sounds pretty incredible.
To experience that state where everything lasts, where there's no end, it's hard to imagine.
It speaks to that eternal nature of the soul, doesn't it?
And that city that hath no name or description, that one just blows my mind.
The mystery of it.
It really highlights that no matter how much we learn, there will always be things we just can't grasp.
The divine remains a mystery.
We can only approach it with wonder.
And that trust in the journey.
That seeking and growing is what brings us closer to God. It's that inner transformation, that striving to know and love the divine. This deep dive has been so illuminating. It's given me a new perspective on my own spiritual journey and on how I can contribute to creating a better world.
Me too. It's a powerful text. It offers guidance, inspiration, hope.
I'm particularly grateful for that emphasis on the continuity of revelation. It's comforting to know that God's guidance is continuous.
That new manifestations will keep coming to guide humanity towards its spiritual purpose.
It's a message of hope, isn't it? That God's love and mercy are always there.
Always available, no matter how hard things get. This reminds me of another theme, treating all the prophets as one.
Oh, yeah. That's a powerful message of unity.
Recognizing the unity of all religions, that they're all ultimately guiding us towards God. We've seen how easily people get caught up in their own interpretations and traditions.
It creates division.
But if we can remember that all the prophets are essentially working towards the same goal, revealing God's truth and guiding humanity to its potential, maybe we can start to bridge those divides and create a more peaceful world.
It's a vision of unity, isn't it?
It is a vision that goes beyond our differences and focuses on that shared humanity that connects us all.
This deep dive has really opened my eyes to the wisdom and gems of divine mysteries.
It's a text to come back to study.
It's definitely one I'll keep revisiting and reflecting on.
Me too. It's timeless, full of guidance and inspiration.
And for our listeners who are intrigued, who want to learn more, I encourage you to explore the Baha'i faith. There's so much information out there.
It's a vibrant faith, growing all the time. A faith that embraces the unity of all people.
And strives to create a better world.
A more just and peaceful world. Before we go, I want to leave you with a question.
Ooh, I like where this is going. What's the question?
Bahá'u'lláh talks about those who've achieved great spiritual heights, but then fall prey to pride and vainglory. Why do you think that happens?
It's a good question. Shouldn't spiritual growth protect against those things?
And how can we protect ourselves from those tendencies?
Yeah, how do we stay grounded on the path? That's something for all of us to ponder.
Yeah, it really is. It seems counterintuitive, doesn't it?
You'd think reaching those spiritual heights would make you less prone to pride, but...
It's almost like it could actually make it worse.
So why do you think that is? What makes people who have had those profound spiritual experiences, why do they become vulnerable to pride?
I think it has to do with the ego.
Ego.
It's always trying to find ways to
Tough itself out.
to feel important, to
Yeah.
feel special. And when we achieve something big,
Whether it's a spiritual thing or something in the material world,
the ego can grab onto that.
and use it to make us feel superior.
Yeah, it inflates our sense of self.
So it's almost like our ego is taking our spiritual experiences and twisting them.
Using them to feed its own needs.
Exactly. So that's why humility is so important on this path.
Humility is key.
It's about recognizing that ultimately our achievements, even our spiritual ones, they're not really our own doing.
They're a gift,
They're a gift from God.
a result of His grace.
So humility is about remembering that. Staying grounded, we're not the source of our own progress.
Right. And it also means being open to learning.
They keep growing.
Recognizing that we never really reach a point where we know everything.
There's always more to learn, always room to grow. It's like being a student for life. That reminds me of that passage in Gems of Divine Mysteries where Bahá'u'lláh talks about seeing God's presence in everything.
Oh, yeah, that's fundamental to the Baha'i faith.
And you see it in so many other spiritual traditions, too.
You do.
It's the idea that God isn't separate from His creation.
He's within it.
He's everywhere.
And Baha'u'lláh encourages us to see that presence everywhere.
Not just in the obvious places.
In the beauty of nature, in the kindness of others, in the challenges we face.
Even in suffering.
Yeah, even in the difficult things.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's all part of His will.
So by seeing His presence in everything,
It deepens our gratitude, our reverence.
our connection with Him,
It changes how we see the world.
like putting on spiritual glasses.
Everything has meaning. Everything has purpose. And you know what?
Mm.
This is especially important when we're feeling lost.
Disconnected, alone. Because if we can remember that God is always there, it can be a source of strength.
Yeah, a source of hope, even in those dark moments.
It's like knowing you always have a companion by your side,
A guiding light.
someone who's always there to support you. But how do we bring this down to earth? How do we translate these lofty spiritual principles into our daily lives?
It goes back to what we were saying before about cultivating those qualities.
Humility, detachment, love, trustworthiness.
Building blocks.
And the more we live by them,
The more we put them into action.
the better the world becomes.
It's about deeds, not just words.
And when you look at all the challenges we face as humanity,
The conflicts, the injustices, the state of our planet.
we need more people who live by these principles,
People who are dedicated to serving a higher purpose.
who are willing to put their beliefs into action to make a difference.
The world needs that transformation, and each of us can contribute to it by striving to embody those qualities.
By working to build a world that's more just and peaceful.
A world that reflects that divine unity and harmony. It's a beautiful vision.
It is. It's a vision that gives me hope for the future. Even amidst all the darkness,
There's light,
there's potential for transformation.
and that potential is within each of us.
Well, I think that brings us to the end of our deep dive into Gems of Divine Mysteries.
What a journey.
It's been an incredible exploration.
We've covered so much ground.
And I hope this has given you a deeper understanding of these
Different
teachings.
power of God's revelation.
I know it has for me.
This epistle is full of wisdom and guidance.
It's something I'll definitely keep coming back to. And for those of you listening who are intrigued by what we've discussed,
Who are wanting to learn more.
we encourage you to explore the Baha'i faith further. There are so many resources available.
Online, in communities around the world. It's a faith that embraces the unity of all humanity.
That's working towards a just and peaceful world.
And with that,
We'll say goodbye for today.
thank you for joining us.
We'll be back soon with another deep dive exploring more fascinating topics that will challenge your thinking and expand your understanding.
Until then, keep seeking.
Keep growing!
Keep shining your light in the world.